The morning light came softly through the tall windows of the old city bank. It was one of those grand buildings from another time. Marble floors. Brass lamps. Tall ceilings that carried every voice a little farther than expected. People moved quietly in long lines, holding papers and phones. The sound of shoes on polished stone echoed gently through the hall. Behind the counter sat a man named Richard Coleman, age 56. Richard had worked in banking for more than 30 years. His hair had turned a soft gray at the edges and his suit was always perfectly pressed. People knew him as a confident man. A successful man. Some would even say a proud man. That morning he was in an especially cheerful mood. A group of younger bankers stood nearby chatting about investments and luxury vacations. Richard leaned back in his chair, laughing loudly at one of his own jokes. The laughter carried across the marble hall. Then the glass doors opened slowly. An elderly black woman stepped inside. She moved carefully. Her shoulders slightly bent with age. A gray knitted cap covered her silver hair. Her coat was worn and faded from many winters. The sleeves were frayed and the fabric carried the dust of long years. Her name was Evelyn Carter. She was 90 years old. Each step she took was slow but steady. Her eyes were calm and observant, the kind of eyes that had watched nearly a century of life pass by. A few people glanced at her briefly and then looked away. She quietly walked to the counter. Richard barely noticed her at first. Evelyn stopped in front of him and gently placed a small card on the polished surface. Her voice was soft but clear. "I just want to check my balance, son." Richard looked down at the card. It was an old bank card. Slightly worn at the edges. He leaned back in his chair and let out a loud laugh. Not a small chuckle. A full laugh that made the nearby bankers turn their heads. "Ma'am," he said, still smiling. "You came all the way here just to check your balance." Some customers nearby began whispering. One young man smirked. Evelyn did not react. She simply stood there patiently with both hands resting on the counter. Richard shook his head. "You know," he continued with a playful tone. "Most folks your age usually come to ask about assistance programs, not bank balances." Another laugh slipped out. A few people joined in quietly. But Evelyn remained calm. Her eyes rested gently on Richard as if she had heard many voices like his before. Then she spoke again. "Just check it for me, son." Richard sighed dramatically and picked up the card. All right, let us see what we got here." He slid the card into the computer system and began typing. At first his expression stayed relaxed. Then something on the screen made him pause. His fingers stopped moving. The smile on his face faded slowly. He leaned closer to the monitor. The room around him continued with quiet conversation, but Richard no longer heard it. He blinked. Then he looked again. The numbers did not change. For a long moment he said nothing. Across the counter Evelyn waited peacefully. Richard cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said more quietly. "Could you please confirm your name?" "Evelyn Carter," she replied. He typed again. The number appeared once more. Richard sat upright. The laughter that filled the hall only moments ago had completely vanished from his face. His voice came out different now. "Your balance, ma'am." He hesitated. "Your balance is $823 million. The room felt suddenly very still. Evelyn did not appear surprised. She simply nodded gently. "That sounds about right," she said. Richard stared at her. His mind struggled to connect the worn coat and tired shoes with the number glowing on his screen. He leaned forward. "Ma'am, if you do not mind me asking, why would someone with that kind of balance walk into a bank dressed like this?" Evelyn smiled softly. The kind of smile that carried patience rather than pride. "Son," she said, "when you live long enough you learn something about money." Richard waited. She continued. "Money is useful, but it is not the thing that keeps you warm at night." Richard looked confused. Evelyn rested her hands together and spoke slowly. "When I was a little girl in 1936 my father worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. We lived in a small wooden house with a leaking roof. But every Sunday evening he would sit on the porch with a guitar and sing old songs. Neighbors would gather. Someone always brought sweet tea. And for a few hours the whole street felt rich. Her eyes looked past Richard as if seeing those years again. We did not have much money, she said. But we had each other. Richard shifted quietly in his chair. Evelyn continued. Years later I opened a small laundry shop. Nothing fancy. Just 2 washing machines and a wooden sign. I worked every day. Saved every dollar. Eventually that shop became 2 shops. Then 10. Then a company. She gave a small shrug. One thing leads to another in life. Richard listened carefully now. No one in the hall was laughing anymore. Evelyn looked directly at him. But I never forgot something my father used to say. If money changes the way you treat people, then you never really earned it. Richard felt a warmth rise to his face. Evelyn continued gently. I come here dressed like this for a reason. I want to see how people treat someone who looks like they have nothing. Because that tells me more about their character than any business meeting. Richard lowered his eyes. The memory of his laughter felt heavy now. Evelyn reached for her card but paused. Do not feel bad, son, she said kindly. Life gives us chances to grow. Richard looked up slowly. Her voice carried no anger. Only wisdom. When you get to 90 years old, she continued, you realize something very simple. Kindness is the real wealth. Everything else just sits in an account. Richard nodded quietly. For the first time that morning his voice carried humility. Miss Carter. I am sorry. Evelyn smiled again. Apology accepted. Then she added softly. And next time someone comes to your counter, remember you may be looking at a story you do not understand yet. Richard stood up from his chair. He walked around the counter and gently handed her the card himself. Thank you for reminding me of that, he said. Evelyn placed the card in her coat pocket. Before leaving she looked back once more. Take care of people, Richard. That investment always pays the best return. Then she slowly walked toward the tall doors. The morning light wrapped around her as she stepped outside. Inside the bank the atmosphere felt different now. Quieter. More thoughtful. Richard returned to his desk, but he no longer leaned back with loud laughter. Instead he watched the next customer approach and greeted them with genuine respect. Because sometimes wisdom does not arrive wearing a suit. Sometimes it walks in quietly wearing an old coat and carrying 90 years of truth. And for those who are willing to listen, those moments can change everything. Thank you for listening to this story from the Black Voices. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And leave a comment telling us what lesson stayed with you the most. Your voice matters here on the Black Voices, where stories remind us that dignity, kindness, and wisdom never grow old.